Real quick, before we get started, I want to give a shout out to the sponsor of this podcast, Greenlight.ai. We all know how important compliance is, and Greenlight.ai is the leader for compliance and EOR services, especially for talent platforms. You're going to hear about them later, but thank you to Greenlight. All right, listen, we have three topics, my friend. The first is going to be San Francisco, okay? The second is going to be incredibly good food, because can you tell our listeners where you are right now?
I'm right now in Istanbul.
Yes. Okay, so we are all jealous. And then the third, I'll give you a hint. It's related to listeners. Welcome to the video. It's that thing right there. Going to be talking all about Alp and how he's our best friend. No, just kidding. We're going to talk about global payments and the fact that you could do anything you ever wanted, but you're in the freelance payments game, and I can't wait to learn more. But Emre, let's just give us a quick, boring, generic intro, and then I'm going to dive straight into your past.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Emre. I'm one of the co-founders at Cenoa. I'm also co-CEO and mostly focusing on product management at Cenoa. And yeah, that's the short background. And I'm happy to go deeper, as you said, and in the past. And
I love it. So, okay, give us the quick spiel on Cenoa, and then give us the quick, boring intro on it.
right. Well, Cenoa is an international dollar account. You can think of almost like a next generation PayPal or Wise on blockchain for emerging economies. So we facilitate small business payments, cross-border small business payments, and especially focusing on e-commerce, e-exports, and of course, freelancers.
I love it. So, okay, so let me ask you a funny question. So let's go back in time to when you were sitting at Stanford. Now, for you listeners out there, you know how you didn't go to Harvard, Emre, because you didn't tell us in the first sentence. You went to what I would consider a much, much better school, one where they actually build stuff, don't just finance it. But
Agreed.
Not to throw too much shade, I couldn't get into Harvard anyways. But so when you were sitting in Stanford, did you in any way think that you were going to be paying the world through crypto and stablecoin and modern payment rails? And did you think you'd be doing this?
Well, no, I didn't think that I would actually be starting a crypto startup at that point. And but I probably would guess I would be an entrepreneur.
Well,
and I have a story about that, actually.
I could have guessed that one too. Give us the story.
Well, I mean, I actually been to Stanford twice. First one was only for summer session in 2007. And the second time was, of course, for my MBA. That's where actually I met my now business co-founder. But the first time, both experiences, of course, was very transformative for me. But especially the first one opened a lot of doors and opened my eyes, actually, most importantly. Because before that, I grew up in Turkey, a city called Mersin, which is not a big city, which I didn't have a lot of mentors or role models, etc. And then I ended up going to Istanbul for my undergrad. I studied engineering there. And one of my mentors, I think, saw a spark on me and said, hey, you should go to US. And until then, I had no idea about going to US. I didn't know much about the US colleges, etc. And then he said, hey, I will arrange. And he himself studied in the US actually and has lots of connections, and then say, okay, I will arrange some summer sessions for you. And then he knew that I always loved new ideas. So he said, you should go to Stanford. I'm like, okay, that sounds good. So he arranged a summer session. And then I went there, and I just loved it. and I loved every bits of it. Meaning, I mean, of course, like the Stanford, the campus was amazing, but more importantly, I was staying in a dorm, and then a guy next door started a company at freshman. And for me, it was just like unheard of back in time, like in 2007 in Turkey, like entrepreneurship. An entrepreneur at that age could raise millions of dollars and start a company and do it with his friends. I mean, I thought this is the coolest thing in the world. So I was like super excited. I was just trying to understand this entrepreneurship, like how does it work, how like the raising money works. The whole thing just like fascinated me, and it also coincided with the launch of the very first iPhone, in summer 2007. And I even saw Steve Jobs in Palo Alto Apple Store, like talking to people lining, trying to get their new iPhones. It was just like an amazing feeling for me. Like just, Steve Jobs is that kind of a technology god right there.
Yeah.
And such an excited product launch. Like everyone is waiting for it. And for me, it was just like full of inspiration. Like seeing that product launch, that buzz around technologies, new technologies, seeing entrepreneurs that young age. And I really thought, I mean, I wanted two things after that summer. First, I definitely want to start my own company. And second, I definitely want to be back at Stanford for a longer time at that point. And luckily, uh, both my dreams happened after that. So that's actually when I was sitting, and I think in the first time as a young kid, I think I knew I would start something because I thought it was super cool.
So I'm sure we've got plenty of books that we both read. But one of the saddest things ever. Did you hear the Blue Bottle in Palo Alto closed?
No, I didn't know that.
I know. I said I hate to
No.
be the bearer of bad news, and I really hope
No.
that the first
I
time
spent hours there actually. I
I,
spent hours.
that's where I had my first ever meeting at
Yeah,
Silicon Valley, and same thing,
of
just like
course.
you. I was hooked. I was like, all right, I'll do anything to move here, especially because the bathroom had a bidet. But that's a story for later. But no, I heard someone told me about 6 months ago, and I kept thinking I was wrong. So people who were there, I was like, hey, Blue Bottle closed. Yeah, so Blue Bottle's closed.
It's a sad one.
And then second funny story. So my wife is a dentist. Okay, so not in tech, and we were in Boston a couple weekends ago, and they had one of the original computers like on a table, right? And there was this guy there. My wife Emre went to touch it, and you should have seen it. Everyone was like, no. It was like one of those scenes out of an ad or a movie, right? Like no, and I was like, sure, I'm like, babe, what are you doing? And she, no concept. She's like, why can't I touch it? I'm like, that's it's history. It's history. So it's funny to see. Yeah, Steve Jobs is the first. I actually remember. I think I saw the building you're talking about. But all right. Let's now get into you go from Stanford, you do a bunch of executive leadership positions and product. Tell us about that, and especially how that kind of shaped
Right.
why in the world your focus,
Right.
you decided to build Senoa.
I was telling you my fascination with the entrepreneurship, but at the same time, I always liked the new ideas, like the new things, new technologies. I think it's always like fascinated me. Before actually going to Stanford for the second time, I already had like two patent applications for two different ideas. Growing as a young kid, like I was always trying to come up with like new small like tools, inventions, like small things like that. So I was fascinated with the new ideas. And like right after Stanford, I joined a company called Slice, and that was actually a very great experience for me. I think for three reasons. First, after I joined, we got acquired by Rakuten, and then I saw like the full cycle of a startup.
Yeah.
That like from beginning, from growth, and then eventually getting acquired by a like much larger corporation, and it was a very interesting experience. And second, we actually acquired another company, and so I also get to see that too, because then I was on the other side of the table with like negotiations, etc. And then third, that inspired me my first startup in the US called AI, and it was kind of a chat GPT for businesses at that point. So we have like a chat interface so that businesses can ask questions as if they are talking to their data analyst or data scientists. And that problem I get to live through in my company or in Slice, like while I was working. So that's why I think it was just like a great experience. And of course, I got to work in growth, I got to work at product, etc. So it was just like a first, like a real Silicon Valley experience for me, that I got to see different parts of the organization
Yeah.
as well as different corporate stages. So it was a great experience. Then I started AI. As I was telling you, it was kind of like a chat GPT for
Yeah.
businesses back in time. I'm talking about 2016, 17, so way earlier
Yeah.
than the today's buzz. And then after that, we joined Zoom.
Mm.
And after that, Getir reached out to me. Getir,
Mm.
I was telling you, it's kind of a DoorDash for Europe. It's an ultra fast delivery company. Back in time, valued around $12 billion, backed by Sequoia and Mike Moritz. So I joined Getir as chief product officer,
Mm.
and because of that, then I moved to Turkey.
Mm.
And then, as soon as I moved to Turkey, we started to actually, with my very good friend from business school, now my co-founder, we started to brainstorm. But it's kind of like we were not at that point. We were not planning to start something. I mean, we always wanted to start something, but like for brainstorming, it's just like, it's just for fun. I mean, I was always fascinated with new ideas. He was always fascinated with new ideas. And then whenever we get together, or like we went for, let's say, kite surfing, or we went for vacations, etc. So because we are also very good friends, but the topics end up being around like new ideas, new technology. So we were both very fascinated. And then back in time, around late 2021, there was a big crisis in Turkey in terms of devaluations, like the Turkish lira devaluated, and that created a bunch of other problems that especially international export and import got impacted very badly. The trade stopped for a few days actually, so it was like it was unusual days,
Yeah.
and that problem inspired us in a way that, hey, like maybe we should do something around this area. And then we also realized at that time, like Wise exited Turkey or PayPal exited Turkey. So, and at the same time, so on one end, the trade, international trade, import, export is increasing in a very fast pace after COVID. But at the same time, the financial products in Turkey decreasing, or access to financial products in Turkey decreasing. And with the Turkish lira's devaluation with the devaluation, it makes everything much harder. And it also coincided with the rise of DeFi and blockchain.
Mm.
So we thought, hey, like, wait a minute, there's something here. And then we realized the problem is not only for Turkey, but the problem is for different geographies,
Mm.
like
Which,
emerging economies. So that's actually how, like, both like the problem
yeah.
and the solution will become like a blockchain. And it just coincided that inspired us to start something together.
Which when you saw, let's get deep into one the yeah, let's get deep into the blockchain, but then also how you were able to decipher it being, okay, I'm going to use a little bit of American word, being fully crap to fully effective. We'll say like fully crap all the way was, what was it? The JPEGs, the stupid little,
Right,
hey, look,
right, right, right.
I own a JPEG file.
NFTs.
NFTs, right? So dumb. And I was in Miami when they renamed it FTX Arena, which big swing and a miss.
All right, yes.
Oh man, but at the same time, I was in SF in 2016, and I did watch. So I did totally believe this radical redistribution of opportunity
Exactly.
and wealth, right?
Exactly.
So for you, how do you describe the blockchain, crypto, and yeah, give me into your brain into this.
Right. Well, I mean, it's just like new method of in a way, like the way we use it is it's kind of like a new method of trans like a transforming or transporting money, right? Like from one place to another, or a new method of keep account of money, or like a keep a ledger. And it really, it follows almost like all the other previous new technologies, like the internet, for instance, that initially it when it emerges, like people didn't know what to do with it. Bunch of weird applications emerged. Most of them didn't pan out, but then eventually people understood how to use it, and there are applications that were so useful that became them eventually became viral, and now like we can't live without it,
Yeah.
right? So I mean, when you think about the internet, like the evolution and the blockchain, in a way, I think it's following a similar evolutionary path in the beginning. And of course, like the idea is just like a very novel idea, and the technology itself is definitely superior than the previous financial technologies like Swift, for instance, which is, by the way, more than 50 years old technology. So when you think about it, but at the same time, when it first started, like the technology itself, like the promise was there,
Yeah.
but the technology itself was not ready. But because of there were a lot of excitements, there wasn't a lot of like very good ideas. But now that back, now that like flash forward to 2024, for instance, I think that's the year really the pieces started to come together in terms of like the blockchain and all the stablecoin revolution.
Gotcha. And tell me, let's get deep into the business cases, right? And deep into who is using Sonoma, what are they using it for? What have been some of the big wins? Because I
Right.
think that's the biggest thing with the blockchain, right? Is help me make it practical. And some of the early wins, right? Where wasn't it like Maersk and shipping? I remember in NSF that was actually some of the really early big wins was digitizing the supply chains. But in
Of course.
your right in your case, tell us about the users, tell us about some of the big wins. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Well, I mean, first of all, like who can use it? Really, anyone that are in emerging economies who sells products or services abroad, and then who needs to get payments internationally, could potentially use Cenoa. So, in general, so it's like a very big pie. Um, we started with Turkey and Nigeria, and because like we saw the biggest need there. And for instance, in Turkey, it's a country with population more than 85 million, and mostly digital native and very young population. And it's one of the world's largest manufacturing and exporting hubs. So the exporters actually use Senoa a lot. But at the same time, in Turkey, there are many good universities who, basically produce very good engineers, designers, or marketers, like very good talent, global talent all around, which could also freelance globally. So our biggest two users or user groups are freelancers and exporters in Turkey. And of course, like we have a bunch of other subgroups, but these are the first two groups. And in Turkey, there are like almost a quarter million exporters and freelancers and remote workers overall, who gets payments from platforms like Upwork, Fiverr, Etsy, Amazon, etc. And currently, this process is painful for most of them because, as I was telling you, there is no PayPal or no Wise that working properly in Turkey, and they get to use other payment platforms, which is very costly for them. And the cost can go as high as 8%, like for one payment, including the FX cost, including the fees. So think about it, like this quarter of a million people are trying to get payments internationally, and then they have to pay most part, like a big part of them, big part of it, need to make pay. They need to pay 8% in fees to get payments from international what they deserve. So it's just like such a big pain point for them. So that's also inspired us. Like when we go deeper in the problem, that inspired us, and that's what we wanted to solve.
Hey, everyone, real quick, I want to talk about the risk that is involved with an independent workforce. No matter where you are, whether it's the US, whether it's Brazil, whether it's the EU, whether it's London, there is risk in how you classify and how you work with individuals. Unfortunately, it's not as easy as just paying someone. The classification, the actual collaboration, the contracts, the payments, everything is intertwined and must be connected in a way that doesn't get you in trouble with the tax authorities, regulatory authorities, and even potentially class action lawsuits. There are numerous examples of this. Just search classification lawsuit and you'll get plenty. Which is why today's sponsor, Greenlight.ai, is the modern EUR, modern compliance solution for the modern workforce. There's 4 things that we want to call out when hiring an independent worker that you need. And that is you need to onboard, you need to classify, you need to send payments, and you need to manage this global workforce. It's more than just one person, and Greenlight has all of that covered. All right, I want you to head over to greenlight.ai and tell them Human Cloud sent you. And obviously, so let's talk about freelancing in Turkey in relation to the world. I think one thing with Turkey is you've always been the bridge, right? The bridge, east to the west to the east, always been the case. When talking
Yes.
about the freelancers, are they working? Is it Turkish freelancers with Turkish businesses? Is it outside of Turkey and Turkish freelancers? What does that regional implication look like?
I think both. But like mostly there are a bunch of Turkish freelancers are working for international companies and for like European companies, for US companies. Now, I mean, lately in the last, I would say like a 5 to 10 years, we also see Turkish freelancers are working for Middle Eastern companies like in Dubai or like in Emirates or like in other like countries in the region.
Yeah.
So, but I would say, so that's the big part of the freelancers, like either Middle East or Europe or US.
And is there any implications related to either governments, working culture, working norms? And I ask because I'll give you something that we're seeing in the US, and that is that there is a rise to what we would call near sourcing here, meaning no longer just China to US, but a lot of Latam based, and I'm going to call them digital workers because it's both like full
Right,
time and independent contractors. But so that's real. And then there also is a rise of Europe with US businesses, and it
right,
usually comes down to time zones and cultures. And so
right,
here in the US, we see a lot of American company, European designers, writers, developers, and it's like this perfect kind of sweet spot where the cost is 30 to 60% cheaper, yet it's no different than working in most cases with an American. Latam, you see same time zones. So you hear a lot about that.
right.
But what do you think is the main reason that you see a lot of Turkey based freelancers be so attractive, right, all around the world? What are some of the reasons there?
I think you put it very nicely in the very beginning. That Turkey is kind of like a bridge
Yeah,
in a way that, I mean, on one sense, the culturally it's of course similar to the Middle Eastern culture, etc. But at the same time, it's very similar to Western culture as well, or like in many sense, especially like in the Mediterranean culture. It's actually very similar to Mediterranean culture. Like when you go to like Italy, southern France, or Greece, like the culture is actually very similar. But at the same time, and like for Turkish people, I mean, the culture is also not foreign to Asia or like Middle East. So I think that being somewhere in between both West and East culturally makes it relatable for freelancers to work for either like European companies or Middle Eastern or Eastern companies. Like, I mean, in that region. In that sense, I mean, of course, also like when you think about geographically, Turkey is unique in a sense because some part of the country is in Asia and some part of the country literally is in Europe. So it's like, so in a way, so the culturally there's a mix. So I think in that sense, culture is important. The second, as you said, like the time zone is kind of in between. Also,
yeah,
like it's not far from India, but also not far from UK or like an East Coast. And then uh, maybe it helps, but like in Istanbul is actually a very big hub in terms of like the flights. I think it's the city that is the most direct flights in the world to
yeah.
any other cities. I think it's something like that. So that's why I think being really connected both culturally and geographically helps freelancers in Turkey to work internationally and in different regions.
And talk about the growth of freelancing in Turkey. So I'll throw out some numbers here in the U.S. So as
Hmm.
of now, between 40 and 47% of individuals here are working independently. Now, that doesn't satisfy or full time. It's usually around one third of that is full time. The predictions were by 2027, over half the US workforce would be independent. It's looking like that's going to be right. And I don't think what they took into account for those predictions were things in the US like downsizing, inflation, even AI, which kind of counterintuitively, the data is actually saying that it would actually mean there's going to be more contract workers, which I'm going to throw one more variable that I don't know if Turkey has, but one thing we've seen in the US now is intuitively, I always knew that working for yourself, and I don't want this to sound like, hey, I'm starting like a business with infrastructure, like literally just being a consultant on your own, it can be more secure, even though it takes more work and you have more responsibility, right? So intuitively, I always understood like, hey, this is actually the safest option, even though it's really hard and painful and you stay up later
Right.
than normal. But the data now in the US says that it is a more lucrative path, whether you're making 2x or you have more job security. So here in the US, I think we're at a place where the majority of the workforce will be independent, majority by choice. Between 80 and 90% of these individuals are doing it by choice. They don't plan
Right.
to leave. Now, Europe, not exactly the case. And if you look at their social safety nets and stuff, and in terms of the employee protections, much different than here in the US. In Asia, we're seeing a really interesting thing where we are seeing some leapfrogging, meaning that the fractional side is growing like gangbusters over there, whereas here in the US, it's been actually mostly the non fractional side. So tell us about Turkey. Where's it coming from? What's it been? What's it going to be like?
Right.
Give us the freelance perspective from your eyes over there in Turkey.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's kind of also in between, I would say. It's not as fast as Asia,
Yeah,
but it's not as slow as Europe, but it's growing very
good.
fast.
It's good.
And it's Also, I was saying culturally in between. Also, like I think in terms of like the growth rate is kind of like in between. It's funny, but we are looking at also like very closely. But I think it's like there were a few important forces
Yeah.
to inspire. Like the first is, I mean, of course, the pandemic, right? Like after pandemic, people realize, hey, like I can work from home. It's okay. It means that if I can work from home, I don't have to go to office. Then maybe I don't have to go work for a company. Then I can just like work from home just for myself. And so that inspired people to uh, work remotely, and therefore that open up people that, hey, okay, then I don't have to work for a company that in an office in Istanbul, but like I can work from remotely freelancing for many companies in the world, right? So like I think that was the first big wave. The secondly, I mean, of course, like the economy, right? Like I mean, Turkish economy has its good days, bad days, but overall, I think people would accept like there's volatility in the economy, and then, but not only in Turkey, but usually in emerging economies, it's very important to get like hard currencies. So it's always gives you a level of security and a level of stability to earn in hard currencies like euro, dollar, etc. So that's why when I think about like the global trends and the economic instability, that earning money from abroad become a lot more attractive, and therefore freelancing
Yeah.
now end up becoming almost like a safer choice, actually not almost, like a safer choice as you suggested, than maybe like a white collar jobs or like a corporate jobs in Turkey, because of the economic situation, etc. So that's why in Turkey also we see a big rise, and in terms of like a freelancing abroad, and because of that, and also when you think about it, Turkey, like Turkish universities, they have very good engineering programs as well. So definitely, at at Getir, our engineering team, I actually end up leading engineering team as well, besides the product team, and then our team at some point were around like was around 500 people that we employed, engineers from pretty much all over the world, like from Africa, from Europe, from US, North America, from Turkey, of course, like all over the world. And then when I think about like the young engineers, and I mean, Turkish engineers are very good, actually. So
Right.
that's why like a good education, economic situations, and like the global trend of freelancing, that it all combined then makes freelancing abroad much more attractive. And then we also see a big increase in Turkey as well.
Which, kind of the last section I would love to get your perspective on is the challenges. So, okay, obviously
Right.
everyone understands why it can make sense, right? But what is in the way in Turkey? And I'll kind of I'll pave the way a little bit and I'll say, here in the US, it's actually mostly basic change management, meaning that all the data is backing, the numbers are backing. It's now an obvious need, and it's no longer like, ooh, let me go on a limb and try this. It really is kind of a necessity on both sides, companies hiring and individuals. But in Turkey, what are you noticing? What are the biggest barriers to, let's just say, 30% of the population working for themselves and companies embracing that as well?
I see. Well, I mean, I think there are definitely some barriers. That one barrier that I can confidently say is one of them is actually payments. And because like to get paid internationally, um, freelancers, like some freelancers need to have US or European accounts to get paid internationally in certain platforms. And then they simply can't. can't have that, or I mean, sometimes it's just like so difficult, or sometimes it's just like so expensive, or sometimes they open an account like then it's closed for any reason, and there is no Turkish support, or there is no like a local customer support, etc. So it's very hard for them to reactivate a frozen account, etc. So one obstacle definitely that we see is one of them is payment, getting international payments. And we realized it's not only in Turkey, but in the regions like maybe Egypt or Pakistan or in Africa or in Azerbaijan, for instance, or like in the Central Asia. So there are a lot of countries. I mean, when you're in US or Europe, it's very hard to imagine like why payment is still a problem. But when you are in the region like that, then you realize that it needs to be a basic this just operation. It's still very problematic. So that's what we are using. Definitely, one obstacle is that, and I think there are definitely like some cultural aspects that I mean, of course, like in the US, people are, I think, more like a risk taker. In Turkey, I think it's still, I think not as much. I think failure is still not as much embraced in Turkey as US. So so there are like some cultural issues, and also in the US the culture is I think more individualistic, and in Turkey it's like more people like to do stuff together. Sometimes I think it means like sometimes they want to go to an office together, etc. I mean, culture, I mean, of course it's changing, so we see the increase in freelancing, but there are some cultural aspects that still uh, stays as obstacles. So I will say, I mean, I think there might be more, but like these are the things that I could tell easy. But of course, like the payment is something that I'm seeing closely, because then I talk to users very often with freelancers from exporters. Like I try to actually talk at least 10 to 20 users every week to understand the problems, and these are the problems that like we see very closely.
You know what? No, I totally agree that U.S. and Europe payments, you're like, it doesn't hit top of brain until it reflects in the cost, right? And until it reflects, because that 8% really means 16% when all is said and done, probably 16 to 30. And then if there is a platform in between, that might get 30 to 60 up. So, it's not painful until it is. But with that said, and this is where one of the big unlocks is, man, there's so much opportunity for talent. I'm right. We've in Silicon Valley, we would always say that, right? We'd be like, oh, what is it? Talent is equal, but not equally distributed, right? Where that generic cheesy quote is. But, so we got two questions, and in sourcing this episode, we were like, I wonder what the big questions would be. Guess what the number one question for you is?
Um, yeah, couldn't
Couldn't guess?
tell
Okay, I'll
me.
give you a hint. Remember, we're an American audience, so what do we love? No, just kidding. We're actually only 50% American, Emre, by the way, so we're actually pretty well distributed. Number one question was, what is your favorite Turkish dish? And
Ah,
and if I'm not in Turkey, how do I make sure I get the full Turkish experience when trying to enjoy the cuisine?
yeah. But my favorite Turkish dish is well, I mean, it's stuffed grape leaves. I really like them.
Can I tell you a
It's
quick
just like
story? So my
I,
wife's favorite stuffed grape leaves, that stuff ends up on the couch. I don't know what it is. Even if there's a plate underneath you, it is getting in between the couch. So it is so funny you mentioned that. I have PTSD from every time. That's like a staple. Every time the fridge opens up, there's grape leaves.
yeah, no, I mean, I think it's yeah. I mean, Turkish food is great. There are a bunch of different options that like when you are in Turkey, there are a bunch of different options. But yeah, so that's my one of my favorites. That's for sure.
That is awesome. Well, listen, most important question, right? Where can our listeners find you? And are you offering a
Of
discount
course.
like free grape leaves if you pay through Sanoa? Just kidding.
For
Just kidding. But We're all gonna
For sure.
cash
Well,
in on
I'm
that
happy
one real
to.
quick.
I'm happy to. Yeah, I'm happy to. I mean, if they're international guests, I'm happy to take them like for a lunch or something around our offices to try grape leaves. That's for sure. And well, yeah, I mean, our guests or like I mean, our audience can find me on LinkedIn, my first name, last name, and if they can, just like I get actually quite a few requests, but if they can write on the request that like we met on this podcast, it will be great, so that like I know who they are. And of course, like my email, also my first name @cenoa.com, so like they can also send me an email. But I think LinkedIn, especially if they write a message on the request, I'm of course happy to connect them there or with my email. But yeah, I'm excited if this inspires any new users, use cases, etc. I'm always happy to talk to new users or new partners, etc. So we are very open for collaboration for sure.
Well, you have made us all hungry. And so, on that note, everyone go reach out, send him grape leaves, tell him Human Cloud sent you. And Emre, thank you so much for hopping on, my friend.